All right, good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Justice and Pieces guest speaker series. And today we have Julius Tiangson joining us. Perhaps maybe you could start. You have a very interesting journey going all the way back to when you came to Canada in 1985. So perhaps maybe you can shed some light. Let's go right to that point and tell you
Sure.
what that was like and about the time there, I think in Saskatchewan, right?
Yes. Well, yeah, thank you for having me. And it's an honor and a privilege for me to be able to speak to, this is your class, right? And I came here when I was only 21 years old, actually through an exchange program. It's a traineeship exchange program through an organization called ISEC. And ISEC is a French acronym and involved in students who are in business and economics, and I was one of those few that availed of that traineeship exchange. And so my first stint was in Deloitte Haskins and Sells in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, which is now Deloitte. And it was supposed to be a 20 weeks of traineeship, but in 10 weeks time they offered me a permanent position. And so that started my journey here in Canada. So I can truly say that I started out as a temporary foreign worker through that program. And then shortly after that, after I think almost 2 years of working in Deloitte, decided to immigrate. I have to go home first to the Philippines because I have not been home yet at that time, and applied for my immigrant visa or permanent resident visa, and came back in 1987. So that's how it started. I landed in Saskatoon in 1985, January the 12th. It was minus 35 at that time. So when I came out of the airport, I could not believe that the briefcase that I was holding at that time instantaneously froze. and I've then come to realize that I am truly in a different country. And it didn't help that my hosts are the ones that picked me up, actually took me to an acreage outside of Saskatoon. So on my way out from the airport, so we were driving for almost about maybe 10 or 12, possibly even 15 kilometers outside of the city. And it was all white. And I said, where in the world am I? And so it was a totally strange place, or maybe I was a stranger in a strange land. And that's how my life started in Canada.
Now, since then, you've really distinguished yourself as a community and business leader. Perhaps could you share some of your, transformation there from those humble beginnings in 1985 all the way
Sure.
to what you've been doing leading up to, certainly we'll talk about your political runs there in both Mississauga and York Center afterwards.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Well, again, when I came, I had $65 in my wallet. I don't think people who would arrive here at 21 years of age would say that today, that they would have arrived with $65 in my wallet. Well, I'm fortunate because in 2 days' time I was able to work, and obviously the office at that time took care of all of my initial needs and so on and so forth. But then shortly after my stint with Deloitte, when I came back, decided really to leave the accounting world, went into church work. And so for about 27 years, I was involved in an organization called Christian and Missionary Alliance. And within those 27 years, 12 of those years, I did dedicated a big chunk of my time and my life in developing a community center called the Gateway Center for New Canadians here in Mississauga. So I started out in Saskatoon and then moved here in 2000. And within the span of about 12 years, developed the community center. And my introduction to the whole world of immigrants coming to the Greater Toronto area in big numbers was something that was really foreign to me when I was in Saskatoon. And we did receive immigrants when I was in Saskatoon, but not 2,000 every single month, which is what the Peel region was receiving at that time. And probably now it's more. And so the whole concept of developing a community center that is geared towards the integration and settlement of immigrants was something that was at the forefront of my thinking when I moved here. And as a result of that, I got really involved in not just in the Filipino community, but in 36 other communities in Saskatoon. So we have Arabs, we have Pakistanis, we have Indians, obviously Sikh were people that we helped settle, Vietnamese and Chinese. So 36 different nationalities that we've helped settle in Saskatoon and got involved in many of their events, many of their communities. So that was an incredible journey. And then shortly after that, the unfortunate thing is I have to resign primarily because I got sick, and so I semi-retired in 2011 and into 2012. I failed in retirement, and so the consequence of a failure in retirement, I went back to financial services, started a investment consulting, and got licensed also through FISCO, which is the Financial Superintendent Commission of Ontario, and got my life license in the process. But then at the same time, specializing really in wealth management and encouraging people to invest in real estate. Then shortly after that, formed my own company together with a partner. So now I'm in real estate development. And while I was doing that, the whole aspect of wanting to serve this country and making sure that I continue to respond to that sense of calling, to give, not just give something back to the country, but really make this country better. And so in 2014, decided to seek the nomination for the new riding of Mississauga Center at that time, won that nomination, and decide and run as a member of parliament. My first time to run in 2015, and but then we were not successful at that time. So went back into my old business and my work and continued to expand in that area. But then at the same time, more focus on helping newcomers, or I would say not just newcomers, but people who already have been in this country for a long time, and yet they could not somehow find the opportunity to buy their first home. So focus my creativity in financial structuring to ensure that many of these, I would say, new Canadians, not new, they've been here 8 years, 10 years, 12 years, and yet could not really find the opportunity to own their first home. So helped quite a few of them. Then at the same time, expanded a little bit of my reach in Southeast Asia, particularly in the Philippines, and developed Aspire Impact Capital, which is really a social finance and social impact fund to be able to finance water filtration and desalination systems, which is badly needed in places like the Philippines. And we had our first installation last year, but unfortunately, because of COVID, we were supposed to install 6 to a dozen more this year, but because of COVID, some of my impact or all of my impact funders decided to withhold any of their investment until such time that things could actually be better in terms of deploying their funds and continuing on with the project of supplying water through the whole process of desalination. So so that was what I was focused on. And then in late September, I was tapped by some very good members of our political party asking me if I would like to run in York Center. And so that whole sense of wanting to serve this country came all of a sudden, and it was truly a surprise. And so put in my name for nomination. Fortunately, I was acclaimed. And then shortly after that, run in the York Center by-election. I came very close, 701 votes was the differential. So came very close. And I think if I had one more week, I probably could have taken that seat.
All right, so Julius, now let's talk about those two runs. How would you compare running in the by-election from 2020 versus your first initial run in Mississauga 5 years earlier?
Um, 5 years ago, obviously, it was my first time. Although I have been involved in almost all the federal and provincial campaigns, either as a canvasser or either as one that make phone calls or organize a fundraiser. And because I'm a firm believer in making sure that you participate in every opportunity where uh, it is important for citizens to exercise their right to vote, as well as choose the person that should be voted in. Because that is something that is not, I would say, very difficult to participate in the Philippines. Although, I did participate there when I was young. I was 18 years old, and I did participate in campaigning for a political candidate at that time. Uh, but it was very difficult to participate then. And so I'm a firm believer that, since this is our new country and we chose to come to this country, so therefore we need to contribute and make sure that we make it better, at least for the next generation that we are raising vis-a-vis our own children. So um, running in 2015 was unique because it was a new riding. I had there, although that riding was at one time called Mississauga Center, then it was redistributed and then redistributed again, and it became Mississauga Center again. And and it was an opportunity to be able to put forward for the very first time a candidate of Filipino descent here in Mississauga. Um, so campaign hard to really make sure that Filipinos in Mississauga, at least in Mississauga Center, would know of my candidacy, but not to run as though I am the Filipino candidate. I run as a Canadian who wants to represent you, regardless of your background. So it was unique because it was a new riding. It was also unique because it was my first time to run, um, uh, and contributed much in developing really our campaign. It was unique because it was an opportunity for me to bring together some of my skill set that I have honed up over the years in managing a nonprofit organization as well as overseeing several churches. And the fact of the matter is that I would say that majority of those who were involved in that first campaign were people from all walks of life, including not just Filipinos, but every, I would say almost a dozen, even probably more, different representation of communities in that riding. So I'm very proud of that, and the fact that we were able to cobble together a strong campaign team from different communities and different background. It was also unique because uh, it was also the first time that a Filipino candidate has put his name forward in the GTA. And there were other candidates in different levels of government, particularly school board. But it was, I think, an inspiring moment also for Filipinos because in that year or prior to that, to 2015, there were 19 others who actually sought political office together with me in different levels of government, primarily among the school board as well as councilorship or alderman. Well, they still call it alderman here in Mississauga. I don't know, but councilors, in different cities. So, and we were all gathered together in 2015, and we had a program, or we had a almost like a town hall among all of those candidates. So that was almost like a watershed moment, really, for Filipinos, knowing that, wow, it's possible for a Filipino to actually seek political office and run um, in a in our federal system here in Canada. So it was unique that way because it became a point where a lot of Filipinos who do aspire to serve this country to actually put their name forward and seek political office. It was also it was also unique for me, not just from the standpoint of being a Filipino, but being a Canadian, to really understand what it means to be a Canadian and to embrace that identity that I know that I have embraced over the years as I have lived and shared my life in this country, and to actually defend why I am running for a particular party. So that was quite unique and quite exciting. Now, compared to York Center, York Center was a by-election is almost like a big nomination um, contest because number one, it's not nationally known that there is an election that's going on. Only those areas where there is a by-election where people would know that there's an election. Even then, only 25 to 30% would actually show up and vote. So it's not necessarily widely known. So the task really is to identify your solid base already and make sure that they do come out. And the task of identifying our conservative base at that time in York Center um, took us about 3 weeks and a half. Although we only had 3 weeks and a half to actually ramp a credible campaign, we still door knock at together with my team at over 30,000 homes. I have visited almost 90% of the polls in there and made sure that I door knock in 90% of the polls, and connected with a lot of community organizations as well as business leaders and nonprofit leaders also as well, and healthcare administrators and school administrators in that 3 weeks and a half. So we ran a very robust campaign, very fast paced. And we thought at one point really that we're going to have it and we're going to win this. But nevertheless, we fell short of about 701 votes. So, but we're proud of what we've done in York Center. We're proud of the campaign team. And, and York Center is quite unique because in as much as there are 17, maybe 20% of the residents there are Filipinos, but only 7 or 8,000 are actually electors. So that was quite a big buzz in the Filipino community there, knowing that for the very first time, again, there is actually a Filipino who is running in York Center. And Filipinos are known to be non-voters together with other immigrants, I suppose. But it was an opportunity for them to actually come out and support somebody who looks like them.
Now, just curious, how was campaigning like in the COVID-19 era? So you mentioned door knocking, and
Yes.
was it different from 2015? And if so, how was your campaign? I mean, obviously it was a by-election in a shorter time period and things like that, but did you do anything differently in light of the COVID-19 restrictions?
Yes, obviously we have to continue to respect, health guidelines. I wear a face shield and a mask all the time. I wear gloves all the time. Throughout the course of the day, I would have replaced my gloves at least 4 or 5 times, making sure that I also have hand sanitizer. I respect people if they wanted to actually open their doors, then that's fine. Then we can have 6 feet, even 8 feet apart, kind of thing. As I would speak to them and through my face shield, at least they can see me. Um, if they're not comfortable with just a face shield, then I wear a face mask also as well, with my face shield as well, and discuss issues with them. Um, and for the most part, I would say 95, even 98% of the people were okay with it. You have obviously 1 or 2% would say, this is not good, this is not okay, and you shouldn't be doing this. But for the most part, people actually welcome the fact that their community leaders would actually door knock and ask them how they're doing. Um, maybe they've gotten used to seeing the same people all the time, and to see somebody knock or ring their doorbell and have someone that is other than their family members or a visiting friend, but somebody who is actually seeking political office would actually ask for their vote and be willing to discuss some issues in the by-election. So I think for the most part it was very good. 98%, I would say 99% maybe are okay with me door knocking and canvassing and discussing with them issues surrounding the by-election.
There's another thing you just mentioned there, and I think I really wanted to get maybe your perspective, being a Filipino Canadian candidate.
Yeah.
You mentioned traditionally low voter turnout from the Filipino community or minorities in general, and then even taking it a step further in terms of those actively involved in a party or seeking nomination. Do you know? Can you think of a reason why we're seeing that from your perspective, a low sort of level of engagement, and what can we do to boost that level of engagement among? Let's focus on maybe the Filipino community.
Sure. If the Filipinos have come to this country, I think for the last 40, 50 years already. They've come in three different waves in the 1960s, and majority of them were either teachers or nurses and doctors. And then the second wave came in the 1970s into the 1980s, and they are more then they've settled in places like Winnipeg and Saskatchewan, and they are mostly seamstresses, factory workers. And then in the 1990s came in the live-in caregiver participants. So over time, there is a dichotomy of the Filipino community. There are those who came outside of the live-in caregiver program, which became a very huge program in Canada, to the point where almost 55, even 60% of the people that would have arrived in Canada from the Philippines came through that program. And then the rest are people under the Federal Skilled Workers Program or Provincial Nominee Program, or the typical, PR or permanent resident visa program. So there is that divide. Now, those who arrive in the other programs other than live-in caregiver programs tend to settle more quickly, and tend to find good jobs, and tend to right away participate in what I would call the luxuries of time, such as sports and community association, and even in politics. But those are becoming too few, and these are the people who would normally participate. Now, the great majority who do arrive in the live-in caregiver program, um, right off the bat, it would take them 5, 7, sometimes 8 years to actually get the permanent residency status. So they've been here in this country 5, 6, 7, 8, sometimes 10 years, and have not participated in our democracy because, number one, they cannot vote, right? And number two, they're too busy in terms of trying to save up so that they can bring their families over. And so when they brought their families over, in terms of their settlement and integration, it would take them another maybe 5, 8, 10, maybe 12 years before they would actually have that luxury of time. And so for the meantime, as they are going through those challenges, it is very difficult for them to actually get involved in the political process, because that would require time that they don't have. They're struggling, trying to make a living, making sure that their children are okay. And so that has been translated over the last 15 to 20 years, because now almost, a great majority of the Filipinos that settled, particularly in the Greater Toronto area, came from that visa class. And the consequence of that is none of them are actually interested in our political processes, which is very unfortunate. Because when I attend in many of the political events, and regardless, I do get invited in other political parties, and because I do have friends also on other parties, and I would attend their function, I would see very little or minimal participation from the Filipino community. And quite often, those participants are people who have arrived here more than 25, 30 years ago. And now they have the luxury of time. But for the meantime, the others that have arrived in the last 20 years, they don't have that. And so the tendency now is to shy away from the political process and not to participate. And the consequence of that, according to, and I could not find that survey, or I could not find that article, which says that only 11% of Filipinos across Canada actually participate in our political process, i.e. voting. We are 1 million people already across this country, not a single representation in the federal level, very minimal representation in the provincial level. Uh, almost negligible representation in the municipal level. And so if there are 1 million people and maybe about 400,000 are legally able to vote, so that means no more than 50,000 actually participate in our federal, provincial, and municipal elections, which is really sad because we've chosen to come to this country, and we owe it to the people who actually laid the foundation of this country to actually participate in democracy and help build this country. So what I have noticed is that in order for Filipinos to participate, they need to see themselves and their interests represented. And the only way that we can do that is to build a political class among the Filipinos. And that is what I'm building right now. Because what I have noticed is that when I ran in 2015 in Mississauga Center, for the very first time, I saw Filipinos lining up in the polls, casting their vote for me, which is very encouraging. And if there's anything that I can really take away from that, I would say that I was very successful in making sure that maybe 70, if not 80% of the Filipinos actually came out and voted for me in Mississauga Center, which has an electoral base among the Filipinos of about 5,000, maybe 6,000 electors in Mississauga Center. And then the same thing happened in York Center, because this is an ongoing discussion that we have in our party. And I say, how can we actually make sure that Filipinos do come out? Because it is a sad thing that a large group of new Canadians, over 1 million, and yet there is no representation in the federal level. And it seems like I'm the only person actually that is really pushing one political party to make sure that somebody like myself is being encouraged. And then I am also encouraging, now I'm mentoring a group of about 30, 40 something, part of my mentoring monthly Zoom meeting in such a way that they would actually be mentored to participate in our political processes. Now, in order for us to actually get ourselves participating, we need to make sure that political parties are actually accommodating people like myself and from the different communities. I often would say to a political party that you're very good in touting yourself as diverse, because you sell membership to different communities, especially for nomination. And you would invite different people from different communities in the nomination process. So we're very good in touting that our political parties are actually diverse. But the problem is we do get the invite to the party, but no one is actually taking us into the middle of the dance floor. So there is, yes, there is diversity, but we do have a problem when it comes to inclusion. So that's one of the things that we need to actually make sure that, the people of different political stripes who may be in this call also as well, that you encourage political parties, not just sell membership to them and make them feel that they're part of the party, but making sure that they do get invited into the dance floor, i.e. Accommodating them in the riding associations, making sure that they get invited to be part of the board of directors, or inviting them in the different agencies that they are qualified, and making sure that information regarding openings for different government agencies are actually being reached out to them and being published to them or being announced to them. We need a solid effort from the powers that be to make sure that inclusion is in fact being sought after, not just diversity because for the sake of diversity, but to work towards inclusivity so that people feel that they can actually have their interests represented in the political process. And I think for many people, for new Canadians like myself and others, one of the biggest reasons why many of them don't participate in our political process is because they don't feel that their interests are being represented. Well, when you look at many of our institutions, do we look at those institutions as somebody that mirrors who we are as a community? So there's a great deal of work that needed to be done in order for us to get to the kind of society that would truly reflect who we are as Canadians, who we are, our interests, and who we are as our priorities also as well.
Right, so I want to expand on that a bit more from, I guess, both perspectives. So I have a question here from one of the students. What advice would you give to new permanent residents to prepare and to incorporate themselves into a new political process and views in Canada? Where can they start? How can they participate? So let's look at it first from the new permanent resident perspective. What can they do, and what advice can you offer for them? And we'll look at it from the other perspective as a follow-up.
Yeah, one of the things that I have started when I first arrived and in 1988 is I know that uh, election is very important and supporting candidates is very important. So the first thing that I did was to volunteer as a canvasser, and I started that way. I gave 2 hours of my week every week, for about 5 weeks during the campaign period. So I started that way, and I got introduced to many wonderful people as a consequence of that. And not only that, I have gotten to know at that time what Saskatoon really is and what it actually offers to people like myself who is new to the city or new to the country. So that's one. I start there as a canvasser and use that as an opportunity to really explore your ability to make connections with the community for no other reason other than making connections with people in the community and getting to know the community even more and the issues and the challenges of the community. So start there. And then secondly, the moment you do have that luxury of time, and we do have, on average, we probably have at least 6 hours in a week that we can give away as volunteers. But if you can carve out at least 2 hours in a week that you can volunteer, there are many civil societies in our cities and nonprofit organizations that you can volunteer and give your time as a board member, maybe, or as a committee, or a committee member for many of these civil societies or nonprofit organizations or non-governmental organizations. So volunteer there. I'm a strong proponent for giving your time, primarily because the tendency of many, excuse me, the tendency of many newcomers or new Canadians is that, particularly for Filipinos, because we are such a large group of people already, is that we only get involved in the Filipino community, and which is really sad because in as much as I love my culture and I love my background, but I love Canada. And I think for people like myself and others, we should be encouraging others not just to be involved in our own communities, but to cross the street and extend a helping hand on another community or in the community as a whole, or as a, and give your time, give your resources. Also, if there is the ability to donate, then donate some money also as well. So those are some of the things that I would do to start with. I don't think that I, I would try to discourage people to who is probably employed or a person who has a business or a person that has a career. It should be a pause where there is something that you would like to contribute, and for a period of 6 years, 8 years, or maybe 10 years of your life, you can give your life in service to your community or to the country, and then go back to what you were doing in the past. So that's what politics should be, or involvement in politics. But there are others that would like to make it as a career. Um, I'm not a proponent of that, but I would not also discourage that. If that is truly an opportunity for a person who is in their 30s and they see themselves as, being a career politician, go for it, But I don't see it that way. I see it as a pause in your life where you can actually give a brief moment of the entirety of your life service to this country.
Now, let's look at it from the other perspective, and certainly I've had the Honorable Andrew Scheer on a couple of weeks just before he finished up as the leader, and I was asking him the same question about, specifically the Conservative Party, right? How can the Conservative Party do more to attract, whether it's candidates or, you mentioned bringing people from, to the party, but taking them from the party and bringing them to the dance floor. So, they're on the floor there. What can be done, especially to encourage more diversity, right, in sort of the more inner circle within the party? Let's say because you're a conservative candidate, specifically the Conservative Party.
Well, it goes. It's both ways. It's both ways. Obviously, the initial step must come from the party and the people that make decisions in the party. So that's the first step. Yeah. And I say it goes both ways because it also would call upon us as community leaders representing particularly a cohort of people from a particular cultural community to actually, put forward the very best of our community, and make sure that, we give also of our time, we give our energy, our effort in making sure that the very best of our community gets represented. That means supporting him or her in a nomination process. That means volunteering. That means building a voter base within your cultural community, within a particular riding, helping him see through the difficulty in being involved in a political party. Because it's not easy. It's quite difficult. There are people who are involved in a political party. I'm not just saying the Conservative Party, but in I would say majority, if not all the parties, there are people who are involved just for the sake of power, and just for the sake of
I think we may have lost you there, Julius. So let's just take a quick pause there. I think I don't know if you're back now, but perhaps maybe you could just rewind maybe about 30 seconds there on what you were saying. I think you had maybe perhaps there was an internet connection issue there. And I think you're still on mute, sir. Can you hear me, Julius?
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Okay. I think we got it back. So perhaps maybe you could just rewind to what you were saying about 30 seconds previously, and we can pick up from there.
Sure. I think it behooves us who would like to make this country a bit better that, we call upon our political party to accommodate. And we call upon also community leaders to make sure that we put the very best of our community in making sure that that individual or that person is supported in the nomination process, in building a strong voter base, and so on and so forth. So, so it goes both ways, and very important that we are so mindful of those things in such a way that we can truly build a society that is a representation of who we are and what this country is becoming and what this country should be moving forward to.
Now, for you personally, I guess, what are some of the issues that you campaigned on, and what do you think we can do to improve Canada from your perspective? And what were the issues that you were hearing on the campaign trail that maybe you can share with my students?
Yeah, Obviously, we are in very unprecedented times, and this global pandemic brought about by COVID-19 is a big concern. So, two things in that front. One is obviously the health concern. Um, this is where, uh, I because the fact of the matter is rapid testing has already been introduced in many places in the world, but somehow we are very slow in adapting rapid testing. Um, if we have rapid testing implemented across Canada, then people would know that it's either they've had it or they're having it or they don't have it at all, and we can safely interact with one another. So that's one. Obviously, people are concerned about vaccination. When is it going to be available? So I campaign on that issue, and the second aspect of that is obviously in the economy. How can we open our economy safely? Um, and the consequence of that lockdown from the health perspective, mental health perspective, as well as many of the surgeries that have been postponed and many of the testing that have been set aside. What will be the impact of that in the coming year? Um, and obviously the people who are quite invested in the small businesses. 85% of Canada's economy is generated through small businesses. So we need to make sure that we shore up programs and support for them. So I campaign on that. Campaign also in making sure that we do report the facts and making sure that we are guided by science, not just. And the problem often is we are making decisions based on what is good politically, and political leaders are afraid in making decisions towards what is actually good uh, for the economy as well as for the health of the community or the country as a whole. Um, I just really hope that after, if we feel that the pandemic is going to be over or will be over, I hope that in the next few months we would truly say that we are rolling out vaccines and we can safely operate now. We can safely go out. We can do all the things that we have done prior to this pandemic. And I refuse to call it that we are in a new normal. We need to get back to the old normal, and make sure that we operate again. I just really hope that there will be an honest conversation and audit also of what was really the health and economic impact of this lockdown. Um, because a lot of the information is not very clear. We just like yesterday, I was listening to the radio, and they were saying about the number of people that have been infected, that it's getting higher, but they're not reporting the number of people that have perhaps committed suicide or harmed themselves. They're not reporting other cases where, as a result of a focus on COVID-19, what's the impact with those that are suffering with cancer, those that have not been receiving proper treatment for some of the illnesses that they're going through. We don't have those statistics. That's not being reported, or at least that is not being reported honestly. So those things, because there is something that we need to learn from this experience, and making sure that because a pandemic would happen, it could happen in 7 years, it could happen sooner again. We live in such a globalized world that we are interconnected with each other through travel and people-to-people connection. So we need to be prepared for this, and we need to have an honest conversation outside of any political pressure or influence to really look at the real impact and the real cost of this pandemic on us as a society.
Now, for you, sir, you've run twice now. Is a third time going to be the charm, especially with the political climate? There could be an election, literally at any point in the next few months or a few years with a minority government. Are you thinking about that, or is that something you're going to worry about when the time comes?
Yeah. For now, I'm just recuperating. um, Although there is a great deal of desire coming from the team that I work with. they obviously would like to support me if I see that as part of my future for next year. We'll see. It's one of those things that you don't take as a decision lightly. But we will see. There is still, and I've always said that uh, you can contribute to this country not just by being elected. I look at York Center and I look at this country. There are three ideas that I have in my mind that I truly would like to implement, regardless whether I get elected or not. Because I've given ideas and have contributed to this country, particularly in the settlement world, where three of the programs that we have pioneered have now been adopted across this country, probably across Ontario. I don't know if they've taken that across the country already, but those are some of the things that I'm proud of as an accomplishment. And I have other ideas, particularly the affordability of homes and making sure that there's building technology, new building technology, and financial structuring in such a way that people can actually own their first home. So we'll see.
And I think I've certainly had other political guests on, and they've shared that the first time or second time, even in some cases even the third time they ran for some political office, that they were not successful, but each time they learned a lesson and built upon it. And
Yeah.
Hopefully in your case, if the cards are right later on, that if you do a third time, you can look back at these two occasions and learn from the experience. And again, you should certainly be happy with the momentum. I think 700 seats separating you from winning the seat there. So any I guess lessons from these two experiences that for anyone maybe that my students can relate to, of having a setback. I know in the legal field you don't necessarily get something right away as well, but maybe can you share anything from these two experiences about overcoming and dealing with adversities and challenges?
Well, very important to have the support of family and good friends, family and friends who will be honest to you. I think it's very important that you know yourself. Um, if this is your end all be all, I don't think politics is something that you need to be pursuing. As I've said, it should be a pause in your life. That's not who you are. Politics is not what defines me. It's who I am that defines me, and the purpose that I have set up for myself is what defines me. And whether I am elected or not, I will continue to be a responsible citizen and try to contribute for the betterment of this country. And so when setbacks do happen, yes, you feel disappointed, but deep down inside, I don't feel that I was defeated, because I do have the support of my own family, my wife, my three grown children, good family friends that have come alongside me in this journey and have supported me. I'm a person of faith, so my church community and people that I know who are praying for me, those are wonderful things that you need to surround yourself with, because campaigning and election is so intense, and it demands so much of your time, it demands so much of your energy, and demands so much out of you and your family. You are in a spotlight, and quite often, if it is in a spotlight, it may not necessarily turn out good for you. Um, so you need to know who you are. You need to understand that you do have the support of family and friends, and that regardless of what happens, you are still the same person, and you are just getting through a very important lesson of being an improvement of yourself before you ran. And now that you've run, you can see yourself as a better person after that. So I think that would be, my response to that.
Perfect. So thank you so much for taking the time and joining us here today. Really appreciated that insight into the world of politics that we don't necessarily have, and especially running a campaign during COVID-19, the by-election. Any final words of advice for my students who are studying sort of in this environment about getting through this and onto the, I guess you're saying the old normal. I know some people use the new normal, but
Yeah.
getting past this period of time. Any final words you can share with advice, and especially in your story from your humble beginnings there in 1985 in Saskatchewan to coming within 700 votes of becoming a member of parliament. What can you share for my students?
There are four anchors in my life that has helped me along the way. One is really know who you are, and by what I mean by that is understand what your strengths, what are your weaknesses. It's okay to admit that you're not that strong, but then you do have maybe one or two strengths and focus on that. So know who you are. Then secondly, surround yourself with good people. You don't need a lot of people. You don't need 5,200 friends on Facebook, you know, or you don't need to be in Twitter or Instagram all the time and find your purpose and meaning in there. Surround yourself with at least two or three good friends. And then thirdly, make yourself available to the community. Network is incredible, an incredible skill to learn, to network with other people in different communities. Who knows, as you continue to network, as you continue to volunteer, who knows, 5 years, 10 years, 50 years from now, those skills that you've learned along the way in networking and the people that you've met are the very network and the very people that would allow you to step up to a further round in your life and would completely change who you are and completely change your circumstances. And then number four, always be aware. Be self-aware and aware of your surroundings. In as much as we may have dreams and aspirations of what our life could be, but at the same time, I think being aware of your surrounding, being in the present, being in the moment all the time, making sure that you could drop off anything if there is anything that is pressing, and you can easily give your time. In other words, don't hold your anchor uh, uh, too closely attached that it is difficult for you to actually uh, and anchor yourself or take yourself out in order for you to be able to be of service or help to another individual. So don't be too stuck with schedule. Quite often here in North America, we love schedule, and I think it's one of the things that I think COVID has taught us. Schedules are wonderful, but they are all just a suggestion of time and purpose and the ability to meet together. Uh, but obviously, make time for other people or make yourself available if it is needed at the present moment.
Perfect. So thank you so much again, sir, for taking the time
Thank
to
you.
join us. We wish you all the best. Now, whether that's a third run down the road, we hope whatever you're doing in your future endeavors, things go successfully for you. So thanks again for joining us.
Great. Thank you. Bye-bye.